cut on your hand, if you trip over a step. Little things, and that acute one is important, that response. I don't want anyone to think of omega-6s as the bad guy. We eat too many of them, and even if we're going to increase our omega-3, we probably do well to just reduce our omega-6 a little bit. But we know we can go a long way and be really powerful just by increasing our omega-3s, good quality, increased omega-3s. When it comes to exercise and training and recovery, what do we see? Well, if you look across the board, and there's been some great research done in this area, and if there's one researcher I would encourage you to go and read the work of, it's Professor Chris McGlory, who's out in Canada, has done some incredible work over the past 10 or 15 years, and created some really good outputs. But there's a lot of work in this area, because obviously there's a widely recognized importance of recovery when it comes to athletic performance, when it comes to physical performance and adaptation. So what do we see? So when we see a sufficient amount of omega-3, so endogenous, so we've consumed enough, we're above our 8%, and there is enough omega-3 versus the omega-6 within the cell, so we're beneath 4:1. Well, after a bout of exercise, we see an increased anabolic response, which is great, because that's one of the keys that unlocks the door to a greater muscle morphological response. So we see this, we see a pronounced upregulation of the anabolic phase. So we're already into the grounds of a benefit response from having the right amount of omega-3s. Secondly, and this is really interesting, we see less muscle breakdown. So we see less disruption of the Z line. We see less inflammatory markers. We still see that, because that's a vital aspect of the response that we want, and that what triggers that anabolic phase. But really what we're getting here in this instance, and there's a lot of work that's looked at this in quite intense sport, is we see an upregulation of anabolic. So we're going to boost our response, but we see a slight, we see an improved preservation of the muscle breakdown. So we're breaking down less to get more. That's a great scenario to be in. We're losing less to gain more. So rather than a big loss to get a big gain, and that trade-off, which a lot of us have worked in that kind of ratio, either early on in our career or because of the nature of the sport we're dealing with, but we're getting this kind of double bubble benefit, increased anabolic and reduced muscle breakdown to achieve it. Brilliant. Another interesting thing that we see is that athletes often report, when there is a sufficient amount of omega-3 versus the omega-6 available, decreased perception of muscle soreness and pain after exercise and even during. So this is really powerful, because what we're seeing then is that what can be quite typical and sometimes debilitating for some athletes, but not for most, that sense of muscle soreness, that delayed onset of muscle soreness associated with intense training, well, that reduces. So the athlete is coping better. Their perception of effort and their perception of pain, discomfort afterwards is reduced. We've got a greater anabolic response, and we are getting a better response with regards to the amount of muscle breakdown. So these are the key areas that I would draw your attention to with regards to the benefits of having the optimal range of omega-6/3 within the cell, because these are really powerful with regards to keeping an athlete, one, not only maintaining but continually improving, whether they're in competition phase or in a building phase working towards a peak. These are really powerful things that we can get back. There are other things that have been associated and attributed to it, which we see across the board, and not just in athletic terms. We see people reporting better sleep. That's a real common factor that comes hand in hand when we get this ratio far more aligned to less than 4:1 omega-6 to omega-3 within the cell. So the net outcome of this, as someone who works within elite sports and high performance sports space, is really a no-brainer. By making sure we're getting sufficient amounts of omega-3 on a daily basis, we are amplifying our athletic response. We are amplifying the training response. So we've identified the fact that there's a difficulty in obtaining this through standard dietary practice, although people should consider what they can achieve through their food. Of course they should. But there is a difficulty there. There's a behavioral difficulty, and then it's making sure we're getting the right quality of fish at a sufficient rate. And the fish oil industry doesn't work. So then that brings me around to discussing balance oil. And I always say to people, balance oil, Zinzino's balance oil is not fish oil. When I joined the company, which was the back end of 2020, which is after a long time of looking what Zinzino did and how they did it and understanding their processes. Well, the first thing that attracted me to them and made me investigate more and get under the hood and see what Zinzino was about was the notion of the test. So they provided a dry blood spot test in order for you to determine your status with regards to omega-3, 6. So that you are previously informed. As someone who's an exercise physiologist, previously the lab directors for the sports science and human performance labs at University of Bolton in Greater Manchester, I'm very test based. If you're not assessing, you're guessing. You want to be able to identify the situation so that you can improve it, or identify the situation to see whether or not it needs to be altered or changed. So I found this was really powerful. It's done at Vitas Labs, which is an independent labs, which has a reputation all of their own. Anybody who works, I'd imagine, in the exercise physiology space will know of Vitas Labs because they're on the map. Lots of places from all over the world use Vitas for these purposes. And I knew they were using the Trondheim red blood cell count analysis with regards to looking at the fatty acid profile. So this all gave me reassurances with regards to the nature of the test itself, so that a person can determine whether or not they have sufficient before they start to consider the need for a product to support it. And then the notion of the retest, because if you're going to test it, if you're going to have a baseline, then surely there's a benefit to then test and see what improvements there is. That's what we do in research. Any publication in the peer review that has my name against it will have some level of test retest. That's a standard scientific practice. And also because it's 120 days, which we know it takes, the turnover of the red blood cell count is approximately 120 plus minus 10, 15 days. So this gives somebody actually a meaningful period of time to make a change based on a behavioral change and based on increased consumption of the omega-3 through the balance oil. So all of this made perfect sense. But then I thought it's the oil is the interesting part. We've got this test, we've got this real objectivity, but the oil is the interesting part because there's a ton of fish oil that doesn't work. Well, the key attribute to this, and this is why I never describe balance oil as a fish oil, is the high quality extra virgin olive oil, so the polyphenol. So right away we've got the omega-3 encased, protected by the polyphenol. Now there's not a GP, there's not a doctor in the world that doesn't advise people to just take a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil every single day because of its anti-inflammatory properties, because of its high polyphenol count. So just by taking the amount we need, we're already winning. Even before we get to the omega-3, we're immersing ourselves in best practice because we're taking a strong dose of anti-inflammatory, high polyphenol, extra virgin olive oil. Win. Then it's got vitamin D in it. So as the world is aware now, I've been telling people for 20 years, take a daily vitamin D. It's vital for the normal functioning of your immune system. If you exercise, you put your immune system under stress every single day. So you should really invest in supporting the normal functioning of your immune system. So, particularly for people, Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere, really, but definitely Northern Hemisphere. The winter months, it should be a given, no matter what. There's no UVB. We're not getting anywhere near enough from the daylight. So we should be taking a vitamin D product to keep our immune system topped up and working away. And the world's come to switch on and realize that because of what's happened currently with the global pandemic. So straight away I saw, well, we've got this real high potency polyphenol. We've got vitamin D. So I'm already starting to enhance my immune status. So I was really happy with that. And then we get to the omega-3 and we get to the omega-9. So, because there's actually omega-9 in balanced oil as well, but we get the omega-3. And again, the next thing that really made sense to me and rang true is that it was based on a person's weight. It wasn't just a case of this, take this much every single day, no matter who you are. It was based on weight. And that's really important because obviously our body mass makes a huge difference with regards to our required consumption. Because how can we have 8%? How can we achieve that across the board if it's not relative to how much we need to take? Because then anybody who is bigger, and a lot of our athletes are, is going to miss out. They're going to actually be taking something that has the right potency, but not at the right level, not at the right dosage. So then it will be ineffective. So straight away, you could see the intelligence behind the design. There was the test. There was the high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil. There was the vitamin D. And then we're taking the consumption of the omega-3 at a dose that is meaningful to the individual based on their body mass. What I liked about it from a behavioral point of view is it's really, really easy. It doesn't take an overwhelming change of diet and dietary practice. We take a little cup and we drink this every morning. Done. Move on. Next thing that we need to do. And particularly with athletes are great at that kind of behavior. When we start to drill things in and we just make it a given, no more thought required, this much that day, take it, move on, done. Habits, routines fit really well with athletes. And I was also aware that looking at the wider population, the simplicity of that would work really, really well and start to provide an effective solution. So that was it in a nutshell. We had the right dosage and potency of the omega-3. It was bound in a really high quality